We're going to start with roll call. Camila, are you online?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, if you wouldn't mind calling roll.
Yes. Okay. I'm just going to look for Alexis Bernard. Okay. Coca.
Present.
Great. Bonnie Well.
Present.
Camila Correa. Present. Lane Test. Okay. And John Erickson.
Present.
John Michael first.
I'm here.
Lawrence Wade.
Here.
Lovato.
Here.
Mildred Don.
Present.
Renato de los Santos.
Present.
Walter.
Hi, Alexis.
Alexis is here.
I'm sorry.
Alexis is present. Okay.
Thank you, Camila. And we do have 7 members of the committee here in person, so we do have a quorum established. Esmeralda, was the legal notice properly posted?
Yes, sir.
I'd move to open the meeting. We're going to begin with our subcommittee reports. Millie, are you prepared to provide a report? I know we just recently had a training subcommittee meeting. You there, Millie? I think you're muted. You're muted.
You hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So we had a meeting of the training subcommittee on July 11th, was Monday, a week ago. And we came up with suggestions of were present.
There's a lot of feedback noise.
But so we had several suggestions that we did members of the training department. A lot of the suggestions had to do with the trainers. There was a request, for example, for current and former election judges to be part of the training process. There was a feeling that some of the trainers did not seem to know the material. The training department did mention at the meeting last week that it is hard to retain the same trainers, but that they recognize that problem. They are working to try to retain as many trainers who have knowledge of the material as possible. They also mentioned that they were going to start a new train the trainer program so that the training would be more consistent. Another big thing that we heard about from a lot of the committee members talked to election judges, and one of the most common things was that people wanted a debriefing. So while we have information about how they feel about the training session after the training session happens, there was discussion about getting some kind of evaluations or debriefing after the actual election is over within a couple of days, so that we can know what the problems were, whether the training adequately prepared them to deal with the issues that came up. Some of the other issues were focused on how to deal with provisional ballots. That seems to be a big issue at the polling places. Another big issue is ID and what is proper ID, and things such as a lot of judges don't seem to know that and election workers don't seem to know that your address on your ID doesn't have to match the address where you're registered. I know there's also been an issue with some polling places and some election workers where they don't know how to deal with let's say someone who's a student who's just registered to vote but doesn't have any ID, and they don't realize that there is a process for that. So we also had comments about the training being too long. That comment came from experienced judges, but then we had newer judges and election workers who said the training is not long enough, that they want more training. A couple of other things quickly, or curbside voting procedures, that they need to be better explained. People would like to see more coordination among the political parties, that apparently when working the primary, since there was a joint primary, people discovered that the training that the Republican Party was giving to its workers maybe wasn't the same as what the Democrats were doing for their election workers. And there was a lot of conflicting information that that workers were given from the political parties. Those were the main things that people mentioned, and I don't know if anybody else on the subcommittee would like to add anything to that, but that is all in our minutes and will be in our written report. Thank you.
Thank you, Millie. Any questions?
Just maybe a comment. One of the problems that clerks tell me they're having a problem with is the challenge of getting access to the training schedule. You know, getting the user ID and password can be challenging for them. So, you know, we need to look and see if we can make that easy and or make it more accessible, because their challenge becomes the judge's problem when he's trying to get them signed up. So.
Yes, Adam.
And she mentioned more training on how to cure the provisional ballots. That's an important one. So is that bullet going to be added to here? Also with Judge Wayner's information, recommendation also for the login and passwords.
Millie? Did you hear Millie's question? Or I'm sorry, Anna's question?
I heard something about provisional ballots, but I could not hear her whole comment.
Those additional comments from now will be added to this minutes, correct?
Additional from today, you mean?
That the judge just mentioned, Judge Lawrence Weiner. And because verbally you did mention about curing provisional ballot. And that I'm trying to.
The comments from today, if we'll add them to our suggested recommendations, is that what you're asking? I'm sure what you're.
Add the protocol that we anticipate having in place. What we'd like to do is for both subcommittees, because the other training subcommittee has not met since the last meeting that we had. So what we would like to do is have both subcommittees provide a written report, and then we may have a special meeting to affirm that report or vote on that report as a total group, perhaps sometime in late August, because this is really important, especially the training mission statement as well, but the training and anticipation and preparation for the November election. So we will be calling, we won't be voting on the actual bullets in the report today. We're going to put that together and actually put it in a written format provided to the entire committee, and then we'll vote on both of those issues, again, probably in a late August meeting that we may have. Okay? So I think that would address that. Yes, Dr. Lowe.
One of the concerns that we discussed that I don't see listed is a earlier recruitment. And we talked about a variety of ways of what that could be done, how that could be done. But starting recruitment earlier, like now in the summertime, and assisting with the parties on getting people in place and training, developing relationships, because we know that once you develop that trust, those relationships, people would tend to continue to participate. We know in March, we saw in the primaries, you know, all the voting centers, they lack judges, they lack clerks. And so we want people to have buy-in and to feel like, instead of just, I'm just going to show up for that one day and that's all I do, but we want to develop relationships even with the team, you're training with the team as a whole. I think it's listed there to have appreciation receptions, meet and greet with staff, and that's fine. That was one of the discussions, but begin the whole recruitment early. Let's not wait and develop those relationships along the way, leading up to the actual election.
That's a good suggestion. Doing it very early, we need to confirm that they've expressed interest in volunteer, because we find if they do it very early, they may forget that they've actually committed and volunteer, and to get back to them close to the election, say, nope, time out, I can't do it.
And that's what I'm saying, it's not just it's not a one-off.
Yeah,
It's a continual relationship building. It's not, I'm gonna recruit you in July, and you don't hear from me again until November. No, we're gonna meet every month, we're gonna meet the team, we're gonna bring you together, and then maybe just a highlight, but it's a continual communication, developing a true relationship, giving them some buy-in, so that they can feel like, yes, I am gonna be there. You know, they poured into me, and I need to be there in November.
Okay. I am as the head going to be calling a special meeting in late August to confirm the report that's given. Millie, that's your committee, and you're welcome to have an additional meeting before then to kind of confirm and finalize the actual report. And Camila, certainly encourage you as head of the mission statement committee to have that meeting soon, so that we can create a written report, and then of course vote on the suggestions, the advisory sometime in late August. And we'll do that as soon as practical. Any additional questions, specifically with respect to training and/or the mission statement committees?
Erica, I don't know if the committee has looked at if, particularly for a very large election November, if we can use county facilities for some distributed training to try to make it convenient for the workers. We got like North Dallas Government Center, Oak Cliff Sub Courthouse, and Garland Government Center, if that'll make it easier, more convenient for election workers, because we're going to need an army of workers for November. We know that if we're going to max out at 469 vote centers. So.
Okay. Got some comments after all the questions.
Right. Anybody else? I'm going to pass it to Michael to provide some commentary on some of the things that they've already done, perhaps, and then he can kind of take it from there. So any additional comments with respect to training or subcommittee mission statement? If not, I'm going to go ahead and pass it to you, Mike.
Okay, great. I just a few comments. I really appreciate the feedback from the training subcommittee. I just wanted to let you know certain things based off of the comments that have been made, that things that have been addressed or haven't, and why not. So provisional ballot process. Just as an FYI, keep in mind that the provisional ballot process, or it's actually much more than provisional ballots. It's if we remember our training, there's 15 exceptions to the standard voting procedure. 1 through 4 are handled by the clerk, and 5 through 15 are handled by the judge. And so those exceptions to the standard voting procedure, 5 through 15, that are handled by the judge, it's incredibly complex. And I guarantee you there's probably not more than a handful of people in the entire county that could walk you through that process off the top of their heads, because that's how complex it is. And so what we did going into the November election last year is we provided comprehensive flow charts walking people through that process. Now, flow charts are wonderful if you have the patience to read them, because they can be intimidating for those who are not used to seeing them. And so going into the March election, actually late going into the March election, and certainly then fully trained into the May elections, we took that flow chart, which is basically a program, a computer program, and we built that into an application on the cell phone. The county provided cell phones to each one of those judges. And if you know how to read and hit a button that says yes, no, or continue, you know how to get through the provisional process or the exceptions to the standard voting procedure process. And so this is a highly sophisticated program that walks you through all those if-thens in a very simple fashion. It says, has the voter provided ID? Yes. Has the voter done this? No. The computer program walks you through all those different pathways to get you to the right conclusion. So the issue that we have with that is compliance. And so we're trying to do more during training to get those judges to use that application that will walk them through that process, and to get them to understand you should use that application, because no matter how many people think they know that process, they may not. Keep in mind that in 2020, we had a 50% error rate on provisional ballots. And so that's why this is so important. And so we will take that comment and we will, we built the tool, we just got to get people to use it.
Michael, have you gotten specific feedback from like the ballot board on their top 5 or whatever the number is on rejections? Like one of the simple things that is at or near the top is election judge fails to sign.
Yep.
The provisional ballot. It's dead in the water right then.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so we have gotten that feedback, and we've spent countless hours developing that flow chart, and then that program then that's on those phones. So it's a very valuable tool, and it's on us to get people to use it more. But I think the majority of people used it. We still have some that are a little uncomfortable with that, so we got to continue working on that.
Question,
Sure.
and I'm not sure where this fits, but I know there've been, a recent court decision around restricting voter assistance. And that just came out today. And so I guess the question is, what is the plan? Is that to include these most recent decisions for our election judges? Is that something you have to wait for the Secretary of State to provide, or is that your responsibility?
Typically, well, it depends. Yes and yes. The Secretary of State, whenever there's a change in the law or a court ruling, they will usually put out an election advisory, giving us more guidance, interpreting that court decision. So if there was a decision today, which I haven't seen.
It just came out.
Do we know if the
Okay.
Attorney General has put out anything on
I
that?
don't know, this came from.
Just a
federal.
very, as we speak.
Right, I mean, literally, this is morning, this is federal, it
Yeah.
hasn't gone any further.
And so we will get an interpretation. I'm sure we'll get an elections advisory from the Secretary of State's office guiding us through that, if there's a change in how we're supposed to operate. And we will then incorporate that into our training, et cetera. Couple other things I just wanted to address. The parties training. I haven't been through the parties training. I want to go through the parties training. I suspect it's probably something like the Democrats are focusing on the worries about poll watchers. And I suspect that the Republicans is probably focused on, hey, here's the things to watch for to make sure there's not voter fraud. I mean, I think that's probably the thrust of it. What we want to make sure is that the things that are taught during those trainings are consistent with what our training. And so what I've been telling the parties is, I'd rather you didn't do your own training.
Exactly.
I'd rather you tell us what you want us to include, and we'll put it in our training. Because it's more difficult for a poll worker to have to go to 2 trainings. And all that
Because
sort
the
of thing.
parties can't do equipment labs, and arguably the equipment part of running election is the most challenging for everybody. So
And if they don't agree with us doing the training, can you provide them the required checklist? These are the items that we think that we expect both parties to review at minimum. That way we know those 2 pieces of information, that's consistent.
Yeah. And so I think that there's a lot of things to discuss with the parties regarding their training, and to make sure that they work together seamlessly. Because I certainly don't want to tell them you can't have training. That'd be silly. Because I mean, they have things that they probably want their people to focus on, which is fine. But we just got to make sure they're consistent. And so that's on our list. The too long versus too short, it's a tough one, right? And so what we did, and I see that, one of the suggestions was for separate training We did do this going into the summer elections. We had abbreviated training for experienced judges, online training, et cetera, et cetera. We haven't made decisions going into November, knowing that it's a really big election, really important election. Our initial thought was to make everyone go to training again. But we're in discussions with the parties about that, and we haven't made a final decision.
But I mean, with the too long, too short issue, the thing that I don't know if we quite made it in was that it's hard to do anything well when you do it once a year or twice a year. This time we had an opportunity to do it 4 times, which is good in a way. When we talked about the meet and greet thing, I think part of that discussion was we'd have more opportunities to do shorter trainings more consistently, even if it's every other month, is better than every 6 months.
Right.
And that would solve a lot of these problems with the because I have to remember the absentee ballot, the provisional ballot thing, because when you learn it, you may use it once a year, so you're not going to be good at it. I'm not good at it.
Yeah.
And I've been doing this a few years now.
Right.
So that's the thing. We're just more consistent, shorter, maybe half an hour things on an evening sometime, every couple months, every 6 weeks.
So what's related to
Professionalize
that?
this.
What's related to that in a comment that Anna made was this idea of relationship building.
Mhm.
One of the things that we've done is we started a newsletter. I think we had issue 1 go out a couple months ago, and I think we're ready. We're going to do it quarterly, but I think we may shift that to monthly, and that's to just kind of. We don't want to just talk to poll workers once a year. We want to talk to them consistently year round and let them know what's going on. I mean, they are our eyes and ears to what our office does. So we want to try to educate them. We want to hear back from them, provide that two-way communication on a regular basis. And so we're building towards that.
If I may suggest, maybe in the future, create online modules or virtual modules, poll workers 1.0 or version 2.0, 3.0, based on the years of experience, and the judges. If it's a module, me as a judge, if I've done it, then I could just go to judges 2.0, 3.0 version, and just click on the module that I just want specific. I want to concentrate on curating a ballot, or curating a vote.
Yeah.
If not now, maybe in the future, but using online modules.
And we have considered that, just so you know, though, one of the issues that what we have concerns about is what we don't want people to do is to go pick and choose what they want to do and then consider that they've gone to training and then they skip a major change in the law, So it's a kind of a control thing where we want to make sure that people are getting fully trained in every aspect, especially in this last year where there's been so many changes.
It only takes one significant item missed to really mess things up.
So it's kind of a balancing act, right? To find that too long, too short, too much, not enough, in which we're trying to find that.
Definitely require the in-person, which is 8 hours, require that, but the modules are always to go back.
Refresher stuff,
Refresh,
yeah.
like, okay, and I'm really close to election time, I really need to go back and refresh it, because once it's down to the execution time, I really need to go back and like, what did we see in hour number 6 out of the 8-hour training?
Yeah, gotcha.
And you do something that's fun, like maybe once a week, a scenario is put up on, it's online, and judges can go, they can look at it and redo the scenario, and they can decide, does this require provisional? Tell me, give some feedback on that, and they can click on something and select the correct answer, and they get the feedback if it's correct or not. Maybe once a week a scenario is provided, something fun, something that people can be engaged in, just so, and then it's collected at some type of reservoir where they can go back and look at it later, just to kind of refresh their mind.
Mm-hmm.
But I think something that way to make it fun for the judges and also for the poll workers, for the clerks who are trying to learn themselves.
One other thing
And for us.
one other thing I should mention is the earlier recruitment. We're going to talk about that in another section, and that is being addressed. Curbside voting, I agree that we need to, there's certain parts of our training where we have to dig a little bit deeper, especially knowing that the volumes for this November election are going to be much higher than in past elections. That's all I have for right now.
Okay, we go on to the next, your report on the 22 elections.
I just want to mention one other thing, I'm sorry, before that. As far as the mission, or vision, mission, values, the county did release their own, they've gone through the same process too. And so they have theirs now, and I think I've got that listed here. Just as an FYI. Yeah, the vision is to improving people's lives. Their mission is to deliver exceptional services that promote a thriving community, and their values are professionalism, customer focus, diverse and inclusive. And this was a long process that the county went through a series of surveys with employees. So this was employee driven. And so we want to do something similar to kind of nail down ours prior to the election season for our new budget book, on our website, et cetera, to get that nailed down.
Did we talk about having post-election meetings with the judges? Did we already talk about that? Okay. I don't want you to do it again because I'm just going to. Okay. Just want to make sure it's good.
Okay.
Thank you.
2022 elections. So the past elections that were covered in 2022 was the March 1st joint primary election, which was countywide, the May 7th constitutional amendment and joint election, which was countywide, the May 24th joint primary runoff election, which was also countywide because of they pushed, the reason for that, it typically wouldn't be, but they pushed the precinct chair elections from March to May 24th. Because of the redistricting and reprecincting push. Everything was pushed back this year. And then the June 18th joint runoff election, which was 75 vote centers, I believe.
If I can take a point of personal privilege here, is wanted to especially thank the election department and election workers in general. That was especially challenging, working, staffing, everything. Basically 3 elections in a 6-week period. It was extraordinary.
Yeah.
And coming here, I was thinking about the poor early voting workers that had to support those 3 back-to-back elections. So
Everyone really pulled together. I can tell you this, that talking with my colleagues throughout the state, none of them can ever remember a 6-month period, starting with SB1 changes and all those changes, and then this machine gun elections. No one can ever remember a time that was this challenging. And so the fact that we got through it was quite a relief. And even though the upcoming November gubernatorial election is a much bigger, more, I don't want to say more important, but very important election, it almost feels like it's going to be easy comparatively, just because we've got a little bit of breathing room to prepare. And then, of course, there'll be a December runoff. So in the lead up to those elections, from the last time we met, which was we met briefly in April for a special meeting for vote centers. But the last full meeting we had in December, there's been a lot of things that have happened. So I just catch you up on some of those. So we've been continuing to catch up on a backlog of administrative paperwork, including, I think, 17 elections going back over several years, with sending the escrow balances and collecting from jurisdictions, giving them refunds, et cetera, going back to 2019. Cleanup of our election facilities. Keep in mind that we moved into this facility in January 2020. And it's kind of like when you move into your new house and you got your boxes that you put in the garage. I'll get to those someday. And so we're getting to a lot of we've been getting to a lot of that settling into this office because, since January 2020, it's been a race. Elections after, big elections and then these smaller, multiple elections in a row. Educating our employees on modern business processes, flow charting, documentation, taking proper notes, just kind of bringing the staff up to speed, and they've been fantastic, that they've been working so hard, not only running all these elections, but making improvements to the infrastructure. reviewing and making plans to modernize the county's infrastructure, including, looking at our facilities, equipment, services, hardware, software applications, processes, procedures, in our organizational design. And so then, of course, you probably all heard that we had a new language requirement after the 2020 census. And in fact, every 5 years now, the Department of Justice measures alternate languages. And as soon as you meet a 5% threshold where there's a certain language spoke by 5% of a county's citizens, then you meet this 5% threshold where you have to provide all of your materials in that language. And so in December, we got notice that Dallas County now met the threshold for a Vietnamese language. So now we're a 3-language county: English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. And so all of our ballots and materials had to be translated. We have to start the recruiting of bilingual poll workers. Because recruiting bilingual poll workers on such short notice, between December and March, was so difficult because you really have to develop an infrastructure. We found a new software application, which is pretty cool. And so we put it on our cell phones, on our county issued cell phones that each of the judges have. It's called Language Line. And so what you do with Language Line, you hit that button and a live person comes online and they say, "Hi, I'm operator 1234. I'm your Vietnamese translator." And you say, "Hi, I'm from Dallas County. I've got a Vietnamese voter here. Take it away." And then they start talking. And that comes not only in Vietnamese and in Spanish, but a total of 40 languages. So it's wonderful. And so that's going to kind of got us through the short term with Vietnamese, and we will continue to recruit Vietnamese poll workers. We requested and received permission to hire a full-time bilingual coordinator for the Vietnamese language, and that job is being, I think it's posted right now, actually. I don't know if it's up yet, but it's being posted. And then we had a meeting with the Department of Justice. They checked in to see, after December, I think it was March or April, where we met with them, and they kind of check in to see, and I can tell you, you're always nervous with the Department of Justice meeting. And so they were very happy with our progress, the fact that we translated all of our materials and we got through the March and May elections, making those transitions, and with our language application app. Redistricting and pre-precincting. Remember the delayed census results? I think we probably talked about this a little bit in December. Pushed the redistricting of the state and pushed the redistricting of the county to October, which then pushed the re-precincting that we have to do, which includes us drawing new precinct lines, election precinct lines, and then taking that information and pushing that into our local voter registration system, and then also pushing that same information into the state's voter registration system. So it's a very manual process with thousands and thousands of entries. In addition to doing our own GIS work. In 2013, the last time this was done, it was done by an outside vendor. And that outside vendor no longer does that type of work. So we had our own 2 GIS folks here doing all those precinct lines, and then our voter registration people pushing all that information into those systems. We sent the voter registration certificates. That was also delayed from December to January. It was completed in January. It was in compliance with the law. The law pushed the time frames back.
Now, somebody wanted to dramatize some of the errors for voters in that process, but you're not aware that it was significant. I mean, it's a very large project. The opportunity for missing a small population is great. So.
Yeah, what we found is we had, I can't remember what the percentage was. It was some tiny percentage of 0.01% that we had to resend the cards. I think it was 11,000 voters out of the 1.4 million. And because of some precinct, I can tell you that the precinct lines are really difficult in that it's not as straightforward as you'd think as far as the lines between the county, the lines between the state, and then eventually between the cities, where it's a science where, you know, they use, some of them use different projections, some of them use Census Bureau lines, some of them make up their own lines, and in snapping those to each other and getting them aligned is quite a project. And so sometimes what we found is, as we were doing our proofing, you know, we did it initially to get it done in January. We continued to proof, and we found some errors, those 11,000, that included not only recent errors, but errors going back to 2013. So that was kind of scattered all over the map. And we continue to prove, and we continue to find things, little things here and there. A couple you know, some houses are actually split right down the middle with certain lines. We just had a call with the city of Dallas the other day about that.
Master bedroom has to be in one county or the other.
And there's various rules that different jurisdictions use. You know, is do you 55% of the houses in this jurisdiction, 45%, or where does the front door land? And so we're kind of going through that with. So we did that for election precincts, and then January through March we had to do it with multiple cities getting ready for the May election. And so we have to do the entire process all over again. And now we're still doing it again with the city of Dallas, city of Carrollton, and Richardson ISD. So we got to do the process again for a third time to continue to draw these sub-precinct lines to account for these cities' jurisdictions whenever they create new district lines.
So that's for May in particular, city of Dallas and.
Well, for November, city of Dallas, city of Carrollton, and Richardson ISD. So we did the other ones for last May, but I think, well, I'm not sure.
Dallas would be May, or next May.
Yeah, and I know that some of them are going to have elections for November, but probably not district-wide, it's probably citywide. Records management, you may have heard about this avalanche of records requests, I call it. You know, the SOS is doing a forensic audit of the 2020 election. Phase 1 was a simpler process that was due in December. Phase 2 was quite a significant load of a lot, hundreds and thousands of records that we supplied to the Secretary of State. And then there's online and that was mostly electronic documents. And then as we speak, in fact, well, they're probably gone for the day, but the Secretary of State's office is on premise this week. This is their third on-premise visit, where they're going through our physical records and they're scanning a lot of those records in and bringing those, you know, inspecting them. And I can tell you that they've been very pleasant to work with. My sense is that they are well-intentioned, that it's not a gotcha type of moment. I think that they truly want to improve the process. And what we found is that when they find something an issue with 2020, they'll say, what about this issue? And we say, well, I'm not quite sure how they did in 2020, but I can tell you that here's what we've done since to fix that, so we won't have that same issue anymore. And so that's kind of where they're going. They're looking for how to improve the process to make sure that there's confidence in it. There's 4 lawsuits, which I've mentioned before. We continue to be, you know, we're still in the middle of the discovery process on most of those lawsuits. I can tell you that I've been through 4 or 5 depositions. And it's a lot of work, those lawsuits. And then hundreds of Public Information Act requests that we've been dealing with. So we hired an extra staff member to help us deal with a lot of, you know, to get through these records. And in fact, I'll talk about that a little bit more, about a new position that we're hiring in also. The new warehouse training facility, it was scheduled for completion in January 2022. So going into the March election, we had hoped to be into that facility. Supply chain issues caused delay in finalizing construction. And so we didn't move into that warehouse until after the March election, in late March. And then the training department, so that the warehouse moved in, and then the training department moved in just recently. So all of our primary election operations were conducted out of this facility only, which was quite difficult because it's just not big enough. And so some of the issues about preparing equipment and stuff, we didn't have the room, and that'll become more obvious on a future slide. So the May elections were utilized for both 1520 Roundtable Drive, that's this building, and 1460 Roundtable Drive, that's next door.
Real quick, that SOS audit, did they ever tell you when they plan on finalizing the audit?
I don't know. I think it's going to be prior to the November election. Something tells me September, but I don't know for sure. So the building is going to be 100% complete by August. And so we will be ready to use. The building is basically multiple parts. There's a brand new training facility, which is similar to this, but bigger. And then 3 different breakout rooms for, for each piece of equipment, which are much, much bigger than our existing ones. So it's probably 50% bigger altogether than this training facility. So we'll have that and we'll have this. And that gets to this point about remote training. We've talked about doing remote training. The logistics of doing that is difficult. I'm not unfamiliar with that. I can tell you that in San Bernardino County, where I was at previous to this, it was the largest county in the country, 20,000 square miles. And we had training in how many facilities?
11, I think.
11 facilities all around, because we were 50 miles away, 100 miles away. And so, but I can tell you that the logistics for that is really difficult. And what we haven't heard thus far is too many complaints about coming here. And so people tend to, so I'm trying to, grease the squeaky wheel, and that hasn't really been a squeaky wheel. So between the new facility and this one, we may just keep things here, though I'm not opposed necessarily to doing remote training, but we'll see.
The open house you have, is that for public, or I would really like to go through, a whole tour, and I think SEAC should, but, I can come with the general public.
Well, and that's why I've got that next bullet point. I wanted to get your feedback on that, because we're kind of brainstorming right now. I know the communications team's been working on it, kind of thinking, what are we going to do in September to make this open house, and who should we invite, and what should we do? So I'm open to suggestions. Thoughts?
What's the least expensive? 1 or 2?
Pardon me?
Is 2 way more expensive than 1 to do it?
As far, I'm sorry.
Is doing 2 way more expensive than doing 2?
Oh,
is
no, I don't
Is that
think
an
so.
issue at all?
No, I don't think so.
Is there, you got staffing issues you said before,
No, I think
We
that
can
would be
do
a
one. I'm
special
fine.
occasion, we can throw a party, so.
we can do, 1 is fine with me, we can do it general public, why not? We're public.
I didn't know if it was gonna be an all day, or if you make an appointment, it's only from this time to this time, or all month, just stop by. I'm gonna.
I think it will be my initial thoughts. Nick, did you have what were your initial conversations? What were you guys thinking?
So I think we're landing on separating electeds and people that we actually like see at work, and doing an actual in-depth tour before having like an open house. So we actually have an open house that people come by, but just doing one for the elected officials, the locals.
Just see this, yeah.
Maybe a day earlier, or whenever we can figure out a good schedule.
Like a preview.
Yeah, so we can actually take the time and walk through and kind of explain,
I do know that historically, SEAC wanted to be, that was one of the requests we want to be more involved. We want to see the facility, we want access to it. And so we want to do that. I can tell you this. I've been to, my wife thinks I'm such an elections geek. We go on vacation to Miami or somewhere, and I said, well, let's go to the elections office. She's like, oh my God. And so I've seen a lot of elections offices. And I can tell you that this campus now, these 2 buildings together, this is easily one of the 5 best facilities in the country. And so I think, that we should really be thanking Commissioners Court for providing that sort of support and funding, so.
Zuckerberg money.
So yeah, we'll continue to take feedback, we'll continue to plan, and we'll probably kind of keep you guys in the loop. Maybe we can plan something around our next meeting, I don't know. We'll keep an open mind. We're an open book right now.
I think we really like to have an open house for the committee, so.
Of course, SB 1 changes were a big deal going into the multiple elections. The SOS provides these wonderful guidance documents and all sorts of communications. And so I think we got 46 communications in the last 80 days leading up to the election, including the day before the election. And so a lot of it was late arriving. And of course, every time one of those arrives, we have to analyze it. We have to review our processes and adjust our processes as necessary. And I can tell you that was a big challenge. Some of the ones include just the highlighted ones to our central count area included new video surveillance system where we live stream everything that we do in certain areas wherever we handle a ballot. And that's been a bit of a challenge. The county's got a very multi-layered approach to cameras and security and all that. So we're working through that. I know that we have had one or two areas that we haven't been up and running as fast as we wanted to, but for the most part, the most important areas, the ballot, the central count area, we've been up and running. So you can watch us work all night, anytime from home. And in central count, we also made a very poll watcher friendly layout. We put up some big screens, and that'll still be all part of our tour, so that poll watchers don't have to be staring over our shoulders, looking at tiny little screens. They can see, everything we're doing. We're trying to be as transparent as possible. We've cleaned out that room. It's kind of a clean room now. It's got a lot of room for poll watchers, for them to participate and to do their jobs. Mail ballot changes.
Yeah, I was going to say ballots by mail is the voter ID requirements were challenging for everybody, and we don't want Groundhog Day and do that problem all over again with voter education of what they need to be doing to be responsive. So
exactly. So what we see is that it's a multiple issue, right? When people send in an application, they have to provide a driver's license or the last four of their social security. And that has to match what's on file in their voter registration, which is sometimes difficult. Then when they send their ballot in, that has to match what's on their application and so there's this lining up of data. So around the state, initially there was really high rejection rates. I mean, they're like 40, 50%, until people kind of got used to the idea of, and there was this every kind of pushed to say, when in doubt, I think our saying was, when in doubt, fill it all out. Give us both those, your social security and your driver's license number. And what we saw is the rates dropped. And so what you see here is for the rejection rate on the primary was 16%. For the May 7th Constitution, it was 4.39%. The 24th. Of course, here's the thing about the 7th and 24th. There weren't that many applications.
Yeah.
So going into the November election, we know there's going to be a lot more applications, a lot more ballots. And so when it gets to this mitigation plan, we worked with the Commissioners Court, and the Commissioners Court was very generous in giving us some money to do an education plan where we worked with the county's outside vendor called ABI. I'm not sure what ABI stands for, but they helped develop a plan for some radio ads, for a lot of social media, some direct contact with these voters who sent in an application that was incorrect. And so to try to remediate those, to fix things.
And I was asking myself too, on the statement of residence process on ballots by mail, we presume they're going to send the statement of residence back. We send them a ballot, and then it's not rejected until it comes back without a statement of residence. So we're not, but to contrast that with how we're handling them now, SB1 response, we're not even sending out the ballots. So is there somehow a way to apply statement of residence process on ballots by mail to the voter ID information process? Does that make sense?
I think that the state, keep in mind, this was one of those late arriving processes. And the Secretary of State's office is just trying to implement what the legislature's laid down. And they're doing the best they can. And so what they've continued to do since then is to rethink these remediation processes, the cure process. And when someone doesn't do, what they're supposed to do. And I know that we're going to have a Secretary of State meeting here on August 1st through the 3rd. And we're going to be talking a lot about that, how they continue to modify that cure process. And I can tell you
because what if you sent out the ballot, counting is subject to your, correcting your application would be a different way to deal with, rather than saying you don't get a ballot until you correct your application.
Well, the first issue is you got to know how to ask for an application, which is a problem. So I'm not sure this number here is telling us more that 16% of people tried it in March and got rejected, and then 14.9% of them just didn't even bother with it in June. Because the real question is, and we can't find it by this number, is how many people who never had done that before tried to do a voter by mail ballot. And that's something that's kind of unknowable. But this number is probably not saying, it's probably giving us credit for a lower rejection rate, but it probably is more indicative of people just not doing it.
It could be.
Guess.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to know, if you have never done this, the way the system is now, you don't even know how to do this.
Yeah. I suspect if we.
And that's the issue. We need to figure out how to teach people how to send in a ballot by mail. My daughter's in college now. She has no freaking idea how to do this. Hell, I don't know how to do it.
When I can tell you this, that the state's forms are really difficult to use. I can tell you, it's so funny because my very first day here, I remember getting the mail ballot the applications, the whole mail ballot packet, and I had my red pen, my famous red pen, and I was, we're going to get rid of this, we're going to change this, this is ugly, blah, blah, blah. And then my staff said, well, Mike, that's a state mandated form. We can't change it. And so what we've been trying to do is to work with the state to help them design forms, but keep in mind that their hands are tied because the legislature mandates so much language that they don't, it's too much. What they need to learn is less is more. The more verbiage you put on there, the less people are going to read it.
Right.
Using bullet points, things like that. So, but that's, like I said, our hands are tied to a certain degree. So what we have to do, for instance, with the cure process, I can tell you that the cure process forms like this long, and it's just full of verbiage. And it's, it's a lot of if then. If you were rejected for this, then this. If you're, and so what we're going to try to do is to work with.
It's not intuitive either.
No. And so we're going to break that into pieces. And so no if then, it's just specific emails or correspondence to this person for this reason, a separate correspondence for this reason, and not all this all inclusive. So there's little tricks to the trade where you can make things slightly simpler, less verbiage, bigger fonts, more bullets, that using plain language, et cetera. But we've got to get those through to the Secretary of State, and they've got to approve them. And I think that they're amenable to the making those changes because they want to make this process better too. So a little bit of work there.
We have to take our humor where we can get it. I had a lady come in 3 times, 3 elections, say, I didn't ask for this ballot by mail. And we know what happened because she got them regularly. She filled out annual application at the beginning of the year, and she didn't understand what she had done.
Was this before you, because I know now you have a communications person, that's all he does, right? He's responsible for trying to communicate.
Yes, Nick Solorzano back here. Yeah. Nick does help with and he worked with, for instance, with ABI to develop this mitigation plan to try to communicate to these people. hey, your ballot was rejected, reaching out to them, here's what you need to do to cure it, et cetera, et cetera. So the county went to extraordinary lengths to try to get our rates down.
Yeah.
And the Commissioners Court has committed to spending some money, again, going into the November election, anticipating problems. So we kind of piloted some of that stuff, the approach in the March election, and we're going to continue it going into the November election.
Okay.
Anything else? So then SB 1 changes the new poll watcher rules at vote centers. I can tell you that made a lot of poll workers nervous. I think that people are kind of getting over that. They're saying, well, maybe it's not as bad as we thought. And so we'll continue to educate people during our training about that to try to, alleviate their fears. Labor, going into these elections was really tough. Keep in mind that we're a small organization that grows, from 50 employees to a couple hundred to thousands with poll workers. And so to get to that couple hundred of temp workers, we have a lot of temp workers, and we use temp agencies. And those temp agencies, when you go to your local restaurant and you can't find anyone to serve you, right? And so you just got to wait. Well, we don't have that luxury here. We can't just say, we're not ready for election day. We're going to push it for a week. So we have to do everything in our power to get people in here. So we escalated our salaries from $11 an hour to $15 an hour to $25 an hour to $35 an hour to try to get temps in. And even then we struggled because people aren't taking jobs full-time with benefits, let alone, for a couple weeks at an elections office. And so we continue to have that difficulty, but we're doing everything through the county. The county's helping us as much as they can, renegotiating these temp contracts to pay more and more money. But what that boiled down to is keep in mind that we have a lot of full-time staff vacancies. We're having a hard time hiring people. And so if you look at December through January or through February, just with FTE vacancies, we lost 6,850 hours of labor. FTE absences, because of 3 days of ice storms and because of COVID, we lost over 1,500 hours. Temp labor, because of unfilled positions for temps, 2,670 hours. Temp labor, because of the ice storms, 870 hours. So we lost 11,890 hours of productive time to prepare for the March election. And of course, we worked our tails off, working around the clock to make up for that. But I think what will show later on is that losing those hours hurt us. Those same severe shortages took place with poll workers. And so for a variety of reasons, some of which we've already talked about, SB 1, et cetera, we had severe shortages for the March election. Of course, you guys know that. We brought you in after those elections to continue to help us fix that. And so we did several things. We increased the judge pay from $18 to $20 an hour. We paid judges and clerks for attending training. We never paid for training before. We had a new program to utilize regular county employees to get more and more county employees to help us. And we provided more incentives for them to do that, financial incentives. And then recruitment of more nonpartisan poll workers, because keep in mind that most poll workers are coming from the parties. And so there's probably 25% of the population that they're nonpartisan. So we're trying to reach out more to them to have them in our pocket. And then
there's a little issue that affects compensation too, is we've still got a 15-hour cap on paying workers, and my time blows out of 15 hours when I do everything.
And so Commissioners Court was generous about that. Even though there's a state cap, the state says you shall not pay someone before 6 a.m. or 2 hours after the polls close, which caps out effectively at 15 hours. The county said if they worked 16 hours, we're going to pay them. And so we did.
Yeah.
But if
That's
they-
not,
but if
that's
you
not
set up
common
the night
knowledge.
before-
Yeah, setting up
you-
the night before we,
and it's
there's
on your own
no,
time.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah, and so those are some of the things that's on the top of my list. Why are those restrictions there? I mean, it's just,
In a manual world, 14, 15 hours made sense. In this automated world, not so much, so.
You can't do it if you don't go there 2 hours the day before. You can't do it. At 6 o'clock in the morning, it
No,
doesn't work.
yeah, yeah, that's-
You're not gonna be ready. Because something always is gonna happen.
you know what, though, I'll take that challenge because, because someone said that to me and I said, well, I'm pretty sure our checklists are pretty good. So we tested it
Right.
and it was like an hour and 15 minutes.
That's if everything is
Right,
yeah,
there,
yeah,
everything is working,
And so,
everything is accurate.
so we revised our checklist. We said, okay, we got to figure out how to re-engineer this, and we did. And I think the next time we tried it, we were at 55 minutes.
But you're right. What about when the polls not open at 6? Mine didn't open till 6:20, the last election. Just stuff happens.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. I want us to get
Yeah,
in,
yeah.
and so we encourage people to go the night before. I just hate it that I can't pay them for it.
Yeah.
All right. You do what you have to
I
do.
agree that the checklists are great.
They are.
Very, very, they're awesome, but there are still things that the elections department does not have control over the environment.
You can't get,
So-
the guy, you can't open the lock, the janitor
Exactly.
doesn't show up.
Old facilities don't have many plugs.
Yeah, I mean,
Exactly.
absolutely,
Maybe I need to get more outlet, extension cords,
Yeah.
yeah.
understood.
So, I mean, just stuff.
Yep.
so,
You do what you have to do.
Question, and this is kind of leading into decisions, around voter center reduction and staffing. How do we, or does Dallas County, do you all, track, wait time for voters in line?
So in 2020, there was a program in place to track wait times. My understanding is that it didn't work, mostly because the poll workers didn't implement it or wasn't trained properly. And so we haven't really dusted that off because we've had low turnout elections. Going into this election, we're going to dust that off again and figure out how to implement it.
Well,
And that'll
there's
be-
a nuisance factor that it would have to be overcome when you're scrambling to get the voters through, and
Yeah.
Well, my thought is that, I'm glad to hear that you decided to re-implement it.
Yep.
We don't want to just abandon it because we didn't do it right.
Right.
Because we know that that's good data, and that can assist us in making decisions around voting centers and staffing at those voting centers, because if we have people in line longer than an hour, I know some of the states are making decisions that is their benchmark. If a voter is standing in line more than an hour, then that's something we need to do. And I know that's not the typical experience in Dallas County. We don't have those issues typically. But if that becomes a problem, that's something that's data that you need to know.
Yep.
In order, because right now, we don't know.
Right.
We're hoping that's not their experience. We know in some of those frequently, highly engaged areas, that could be the issue. We know it's 7 o'clock, some people didn't get to vote until 8.
Yeah.
So we know they stood in line at least an hour in some of those voting centers.
I think that gathering that data is really important because we need accurate information. And I can tell you this, though, that we do what we can pretty successfully with our analytics program. It used to be that we just kind of, by gut instinct, say, well, we need this many people here, this many people there. Beginning in November and every election since, we have a fairly sophisticated analytics program where we measure based off a historic turnout, how many people are going to vote at each location and how many people are going to vote when. And so every vote center has a little bit different characteristic. A blue collar area is going to be busy between 7 and 8 in the morning and 5 and 7 at night. Retirement community, it might be evenly spread out all day. They have different characteristics voting on a Saturday as opposed to a Tuesday, because Saturday they're more likely to vote close to home. On a Tuesday, they're most likely to vote on their way to work or on their way home from work. And so taking in all those variables, every election that we get under our wing, we get better and better and better at it. And so we're getting pretty good so we can properly distribute people and equipment. And because the enemy of elections is doing things by average. And that's how most places do it, frankly. And because when you do things based on averages, you oversupply and you undersupply. And so having this analytics program, I can tell you that in my previous county, we were the country's leader in this. And Melissa back there, she was the one leading the charge. And I was asked to speak twice on a national level to try to train people on how to do this more sophisticated analytics. And so we're doing that here, but there's always going to be some misses. I'll give you a good example. So we have a voting machine, a second voting machine, a third voting machine, and an ADA voting machine at a location. And so we do our analytics based off of, I got 4 voting machines. And then some judges say, well, that ADA voting machine is only for people with, ADA people. And so that blows up our whole program. So it's an education piece, right? And I always explain to them, I said, it's like if you have to go to the bathroom, are you going to use the ADA stall or not? Use the ADA stall. But that's an education piece that's on us, and we got so that's why I say sometimes there's going to be some misses. Sometimes there's a late push, voter educate, get out the vote effort in a certain neighborhood that's unexpected. So something blows up those formulas sometimes. And so what we try to do is include a lot of padding in whatever we project. We try to add a big pad to make up for those things. And so, like I said, we get better and better at it every time. Now going into the November election, it's a pretty stable type of election. So we think our projections will be pretty good as opposed to some of these odd elections and the March election and the last frequent ones we've had. But anyway, we're feeling pretty good about that. And not only is it's more efficient, but it services people better because now the difficult thing though is what you guys might hear about is judges end up with post-traumatic stress syndrome.
Yes.
Because in their minds, it's like when the presidential, I had 20 machines and you're only sending me 4? Well, because that was a 70% turnout election and this is a 9% turnout election. And so they don't know the same things that we know. And so that's on.
Be part of the training.
Exactly. It's on us to try to.
Alleviates that anxiety that you're taking in.
Exactly. So there's areas that we still need to grow and to get them on board with the plan.
And realize too, considering the ADA machine, I have found that there are many people who have mobility issues that can still use the standard machines, very well, very, very easily. So it's not like we have to shuttle them off to the ADA machines either, so.
Yeah.
Michael, real quickly, of course, in 2020, March of the Polls kind of created Dallas Votes. And Dallas Votes was a coalition of different groups, kind of provided advisories and commission, worked with the elections department on a series of things. One of them, of course, being the time, the reporting back on the amount of time it was taking people to get through the polling location. One of the biggest ones, of course, we were dealing with in 2020, of course, was COVID. A situation where people were fearful. Of course, I haven't extended the early voting, things of that nature.
Right.
But right now, we're in orange in Dallas County.
Right.
With this B5 variant, whatever the case may be, the biggest one going on. We can anticipate now what could potentially happen in November. And I think it would behoove the elections department to kind of take that into consideration. Early voting should be something we should be putting out there because of the very real possibility that something like this could happen. And it's, when you have huge lines of folks on election day, the scary thing with COVID, if we're in orange or God forbid red at the time, we want to encourage that early vote. So now I would imagine would be the time to encourage that very real thing. And lots of people still don't know in our county that you can vote anywhere within the county. I know that's a crazy thing. They need to understand that.
That gets back to our education effort. And so like so that gets to our next book.
Yeah, I think I was trying to jump the gun a little bit. When
we last met, we talked about vote center reductions. And after we made those reductions, and we did an education effort, and the effort wasn't so much, hey, there's a reduction in polling places. the education effort was, hey, you know, you can vote anywhere. And in order to, before you go vote, go look at our online and see where you can go vote. So, because that's going to happen every election, right? There's always something closed. And so we don't want to just focus on the negative, we're closing places. It's focus on the positive. You can vote anywhere, and here's how to find out where. And so that's what we're going to do big time going into November.
Michael, you want just a couple of warehouse notes, I'll call them. The e-poll books don't come with a plug that allows you to marry the printer with the e-poll book unit. And the electric supply box doesn't always contain, power strip that coordinates with the number of an e-poll book. So I suggest we just put a dual plug inside the blue case. And that will mean we always have, a dual plug with the e-poll book, because we found ourselves having to scramble around for power strips and cords that we didn't get with them. So that would be an easy resolution. Just a dual plug in the e-poll books case, would make it easier for judging. There's something else too. It was a wonderful concept of putting all the little signs on one big, one big master sign, but that's problematic because those are so large that they get rolled up in the election supply cabinet, and the problem is they retain their rolled memory and they won't stay on the wall. Does that make sense? I think there's a break point. Huh? There is a break point on those, I think, where they could be cut in half and stored flat, because I've got porous bricks in my vote center and I've tried everything to have those big signs stick, and I'll maybe leave it the night before and we're in good shape. I come back and it's rolled up on the floor. So that's a practical problem.
Did you try
for election
judges?
judges. Huh?
The back of your ESC.
I keep those out of the election. I don't put the ESCs in the election era proper. So, but because I'm usually trying to use the walls. Okay. I even bought some green tape, which is supposed to be more sticky than the blue, and that didn't even work. But if we can look at severing those, cutting them in half and storing them flat, I think we're going to have less of the roll memory problem with those signs. So
it's a good suggestion. So getting to the vote center stuff. So the last time we met, we had met with multiple organizations, including this organization, to come to a consensus on the reduction of polling places going into the May elections, May and June elections only. And because we knew that the turnout was going to be really low, and we knew that we had way more polling places than any other jurisdiction, and that we thought it was wise to reduce. So we reduced by approximately 40 locations. We ended up at, I think, 407 for the May 7th election and 402 for so it was even more than 40 by the time some of including those people that didn't want us there because of school, construction, things like that. But even with that, looking at this chart, you'll see that for the May 7th election, we had 127 locations with under 25 voters. And I think we had, what were some of the other statistics?
There were 20-ish locations with under 10 voters.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a location that had 1 voter.
Wow. Yeah.
Say it again, I didn't hear you.
There was 1 location that had a single voter in the May 7th
What was that
election.
one with 110?
There was about 20 locations that had under 10 voters.
Under 10.
Yeah.
Was it May 7th?
And then for the May 24th, the stats were a little bit better, where there, the turnout was a little bit higher. There was only 40 locations with under 25 voters. But then, 120 or 112 or whatever it was with between 25 and 50, et cetera. So keep in mind that I had one person say, well, so are we going to do the reductions for November? And I said, no. We don't know enough yet to.
You like your job.
Right. So, but what we do need to do is going in, I'm not sure if we're gonna do it this summer or not, because our time is limited. It may be post-November, but we're gonna pull together the Vote Center Advisory Committee. We're gonna look at this issue for next summer. And, you know, in my mind, there should be kind of a two-tiered approach. There should be a big election model and a small election model, where you have, you know, 450 locations and 220 locations or something like that. And so, you know, and people get used to that. Oh, there's a big election, there's a small election. And so that's just my thought, but that's what the Vote Center Advisory Committee will be looking at. We'll be looking at these ideas of, we've got to do a better job of surveying our locations. We know very little about our locations. I saw a picture someone sent in of a location where they had a piece of plywood as their ADA ramp, and it just looked terrible.
Oh.
And we don't know how many outlets, we don't know the size of the rooms, we don't know how many available parking spots, et cetera, et cetera. We did a survey back in 2019 for ADA access. We took that survey, we put it in a big binder and put it on the shelf and never looked at it again. What we're planning on doing is to go out with iPads, with measuring tapes, with pictures and videos, surveying those places properly, knowing the number of voting, the size of the rooms, the number of outlets, the number of parking stalls, you know, et cetera, know the true capacity of these locations. And so, but that's 500-600 locations. So that's going to be a big project that we're going to be taking up sometime, hopefully soon. But bottom line is, for November, we're going to go into this with the idea that we have 469 that were gavelled down by Commissioners Court in 2019, and that's what we're going to, you know, go into to use for November. Because that's the safe thing to do right now. Okay.
Yeah. Am I echoing?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to echo. So my comment was that I looked at, looking at reducing voting locations with the theme of big election, small election. But I would also like to add that it'd be nice to just close the gap, like to work towards closing a gap, because every election is important, right? There's no such thing as a big or a small election. Like, every election is just as important. I just wanted to add that as a comment and as a goal to close that gap over many, many years, I know, but maybe it's the optimist in me. That was all.
Completely understand your point. So getting to the March joint primary election. So this was the county's first joint primary election. Like anything else, whenever there's something new, there's always this, you know, psychological hurdle to get past. But there was a lot of benefits. The benefits for voters, uniform locations for both parties, resulting in clear messaging and less confusion. You're not going to a Democratic location, a Republican location, or a Democratic side of the room and a Republican side of the room. Familiar and simpler process for voters at the vote centers. It's the same as voting as always. One check-in station, same voting machines, same vote tabulator, so it's easier on the judges, etc. And of course, then the anonymity of the voters' ballot choice. They don't have to pick a Republican line, Democratic line. They just, it's done silently. They pick their ballot on screen. Benefits for the political parties. We talked about the difficulties of getting judges. If we hadn't done a joint election, we most likely would have been paying poll workers $12 an hour and not $16 and $18 an hour, because that's what the state reimburses. And so by doing a joint primary, we were in a contract with the Commissioners Court, and we're in that contract with Commissioners Court. We were able to, the Commissioners Court then could say, okay, we're going to pay the difference. And so they paid the difference between that $12 and that $18. So a huge benefit for us there. Vote center recruitment, management, and payment was done by the county. So the parties didn't have to go out and recruit their own polling places, et cetera. There was a coordinated effort between the parties and our office to recruit poll workers, which I can tell you, we all beat the bushes and you know, we ended up coming up short anyway. But if we hadn't had the coordinated efforts and the parties were on their own, they probably would have come up even more short. There was a huge effort to try to lessen the conflict in November, because we know that there's going to be this, right? There's going to be people fighting. We saw it, you can see it on day one of early voting. There was this kind of conflict. And then after day 2, day 3, then people say, well, they're just another guy. They just happen to be a Republican and I have to be a Democrat. And people get to know each other. They get more friendly, and the conflict lessens. And so what we really wanted to do, one of the benefits of having this joint election is to say, during this non-controversial election where people are voting on their own stuff, let's get them to work together, get them to work as a team, as opposed to fighting all the time. And so we hope that it's going to make November smoother. And we allocated equal number of Democratic and Republican clerks and judges. This was tough because given our time frames and getting the agreement to go to a joint election came late, and then the assignment of poll workers came late, and so everything last year, the time frames were just all compressed, and so it made things a little bit more difficult. Which we won't have those issues going into November. And then finally, the party judge handled the exceptions to the standard voting procedure for their own workers. So that was probably the one difference. Instead, it wasn't just any judge, it was the Democratic judge handled Democrats, the Republican judge handled Republicans. And that was all by contractual agreement with the parties. And I can tell you that the party chairs were really brave because they did the right thing for their constituents, but you know, they took a little grief. I mean, you know, because change is change, and change is sometimes difficult for some people. Highlighted new implementations for those 3 elections. So I already mentioned the Vietnamese signage and publications, successful implementation of a new e-poll book monitoring process. So when someone goes and we tell them, the first thing you're supposed to do is to turn on your e-poll books. You know, some of them listen, but some of them don't. And so we can monitor those. And so we have a whole dashboard where we red lights, and then they start coming on green. And then by 6:15 in the morning, if they're not, we start calling. We say, we see you're not on yet. What's going on? You know, you having problems? And so we harass people to get them to make sure that they're opened. And so that was a great process for us.
Well, that assumes the Wi-Fi is up.
That's true. And sometimes
that's number step 1.
Sometimes that'll be the answer. They'll say, I'm up and running, my Wi-Fi's not working. Okay, we're good. You know, so yeah, because you can run without your Wi-Fi, you know, right? You can still process voters. You know, the modification of the vote center procedures for SB1, you know, we mostly designed the new processes and the new training for November, but then we had to modify again for March in this, you know, subsequent elections. And so that went really well. I think that the training, on our training surveys, I think people rated our training a 4.7 out of 5 was our average. So that was very well accepted. The May 7th election, we had the implementation of the judge app I already talked about. May 24th election, we implementation of new GIS logistics delivery tracking tool. To track the deliveries of all of these 400 plus locations is very difficult. And especially between the 2 elections, between the May 7th and the May 24th election, we had 17-day.
Because you recalled everything from each election and then reset it. Is that correct for the 3 or not?
We had kind of an interesting way of doing this, using this tracking tool. We had a rotation. We picked up from locations and delivered at the same time. So we prepared like 50 locations new, and then we brought the new ones out, brought the old ones back, and then we prepared another 50, and we did that. And there was kind of this rotation on an ongoing basis. If we hadn't done that, we would have never got them delivered with only a 17-day window. So it was an incredible feat for our logistics department, and then assisted by our GIS department that helped us with this tracking tool. And then successful implementation of our mobile inspector tool. So our inspectors, instead of having a paper checklist, they had a mobile application where they were just going down their checklist, and we can see that in real time. And so we have a better idea of what's going on in the field as they're doing that. And so we're moving a lot more towards that automated real-time tracking in everything we do. So I didn't mention this, but the November election last year went pretty well. Leading up to the primary, we had so many things to deal with: lost labor, SB1 implementation, late poll workers, blah, 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 all these things. And you can see, looking at this sheet, the result of that. Mail ballots, we had some issues. We had personnel, we had various issues. Facility, we had some issues. Logistics, getting the stuff out there because of those lost hours. Election hardware, the preparation of the machinery, not having the room to spread out, et cetera, et cetera. Opening issues. And so then by the May 7th constitutional, we had a little bit more room to fix some of these, and then by the 24th, we addressed most of them, and by June 18th, we had a pretty flawless election. So the norm was November and May 24th. The aberration was, all the things that led to the problems that, from March and from May 7th. So having said that, pretty confident going into November. And so I want to talk about that next, is our tactical plan. So, the way I kind of talk about it is our tactical plan to modify processes. I mean, we have our real jobs to run elections, but then our secondary job is to improve things. And so this is an inventory of our major modifications by department to improve the organization. And this is just to give you some idea of what that looks like. So you have that in front of you. This is, by department kind of list, and this isn't comprehensive. It's probably 90%, 85 to 90% of the way there. Kind of talking about all the department by department, the identified problems, what we've done to fix it, what the timeline is, et cetera. And so this is a living, breathing document that we try to keep updated. The highlights from this going into the November elections is each department, what are the one or two things that we can do in the short timeline we have to get ready for that election?
Mike,
Yes.
so the problems collected in this tactical plan, were these derived from the surveys, from staff, for training, for poll workers? Where did this information, was it staff persons reporting?
All of the above.
All of these, so it's a combined?
Yeah, everywhere we could identify, whether it's a complaint, whether it's from our inspector list, whether it's an observation that we've made, and so it's all the above. So what I've got on the next few slides are the highlights of the 22 modifications in preparation for the November election. What are we going to modify going into November? First off, this is our org chart. I think you guys all have a copy of it. The biggest change here is that we're going to add a new department. Right now, our admin manager handles HR and fiscal matters. And what we found is that's just a little overwhelming. And so what we're going to build this new HR and records department, and this HR and records manager is going to handle, number one, all of our HR to try to do more with our employee education and evaluations, et cetera, et cetera. But moreover, the other thing they're going to handle all this Public Information Act requests, audits, lawsuits, things like that, the records that go through there. And then the other big, huge growth area for us that we're very concerned about is safety. We had a DHS audit of this campus, and the DHS is doing audits of all the county buildings. And I can tell you that none of them are grading out well. That our security is not good. It's not terrible, but it's not where it needs to be. And with the shooting in Southern Texas, we know that we've got schools that are very concerned about us being on campus. And we've got to do what we can to give them, to show them we've got a plan in place to properly react to any problems. And so we don't
I
have
might
that.
comment on that for schools, because I have some background. It's unfortunately, schools today need to look more like prisons than daycare centers. And so society is not really ready perhaps to take it to that level, but that's really how they secure the kids. So businesses have issues, like your operation has similar issues. So.
Yeah. So we're going to.
Thank God that our schools do not look like prisons.
Yeah.
If you want to secure the kids.
That's a totally different conversation. I'm not even sure why we're going in that direction. That's a different conversation.
That's what I did. I did safety for school districts for 30 years. So
Okay.
it's a whole different ballgame.
We'll agree to disagree if you want to keep the kids safe, so.
I mean, you could do that. You could put them in the ground. Let's just put everybody in the
Veer to the
There's a
direction.
lot of options, but.
There's no perimeter fencing on most schools. That's one big issue in
And
particular.
of course, we can't control the security out of a school, right?
Right.
But
That's not the point.
what we can try to do is to be a facilitator and to make sure that we know a coordinator, that we know, communicate, so the sheriffs are communicating with the local police, we're communicating with them, that we've got kind of that we're aware of what their security plans are, they're aware of what our security plans are. And so that's a big growth area for us.
That goes back to communication to those teams, those voting teams, those
Yep.
election teams, those looking at those schools.
Yep.
And also, but that should apply to anything. It can be from the breakfast centers to the churches. I think that should be a request when you're meeting with those entities, those governmental entities, when you have those meetings, you need to ask them to provide a copy of their safety plan.
I agree.
And once they submit that safety plan to you, because it is a requirement for the state, and
Yep.
maybe even upped it to the emergency operational plan. And they should provide that for you so that you can know how to respond to your election workers that are working at those campuses.
Yep.
Those facilities.
Couldn't agree more. So we don't have any of that now. So that's a big growth area for us. And so that's the biggest thing. What we've also done is we've taken across the board, we're trying to build, we've got several new reclassifications where we're trying to build better career ladders within each department so people can grow within the departments. And so we've got, I think, 5 or 6 reclassifications in front of, will be in front of Commissioners Court and Civil Service coming soon. So the HR records, this is what I talked about, create this new HR and records department. And then administration for them. This is really formatted weird. Payroll modifications, their big project is payroll modifications. Historically, we've had payroll process issues for years. I can tell you that when I got here in 2020, in December 7th, I saw dozens of people here. I'm like, what are all these people doing? This was more than a month out. They're processing payroll for the November election, yeah. And they were here through January.
Volunteers?
No, county employees.
County employees.
And so the 2020 election was a big challenge, but historically, there's always been a challenge with payroll because it's a manual process. For the March and May elections, I can tell you that we had human errors by our department, by the auditor's office, by the treasurer's office. We each had a hand in messing something up that delayed poll worker pay. And so what we've done short term, what we've done basically starting after the March election is, we're moving our information into instead of just into Oracle payroll system, into our own internal database also, where we can do more proofing, changing the formulas, going from hand calculated calculated payroll to spreadsheet driven, where it's formula based, improving the proofing process, matching up Oracle reports compared to our voter registration database, and new spreadsheets to simplify this. It's still a hand-driven process to enter information into Oracle, into the county's payroll system. I mean, it's really old school. So we're doing what we've done already is we've done what we can to try to automate that. So that was going into, for instance, the last 2 elections. Long term, and what we're in the middle of right now is to use our e-poll books. We've worked with our vendor so that on your e-poll books, they can use that as a time clock. And so then it'll be a digitized process to go into our election worker database. We'll have a more automated, you still got to do audits whenever data moves from one to another. We got to do some auditing, and then do an automated import into Oracle, into the payroll system. And so if and when we get this, and then to have more people on direct deposit. If that happens, people will be paid within a week, let alone a month. So we're moving in that direction, and that's a big project.
Well, we still got kind of an outlier is that we talk about the setup time the night before. You're not using e-poll book to deal with any time issues.
So there's a lot of auditing that has to be done. There's still
That's volunteer time.
Yeah. And this is just an example to show you guys how when we look at a process, how we revise a process. So people say, well, how hard can it be to pay people? That's the payroll process right there. Each box, it's showing you what has to be done to get through that process. And so we take this, and then this is the existing process and how we've modified it to date, and then we make that conversion over to an electronic process where you're eliminating a lot of these steps, and so it's something that we've done a lot internally, historically, and so we're doing that here to try to we're doing that not only for the payroll process, but the actual whole, I think on the next slide, well, one of these upcoming slides, the whole process for the appointment of judges, the placement of judges, and we're in the middle of that right now also, kind of flow charting that out. Communications department, this is a huge area of growth for us. I can tell you when Nick started in January, ever since he's been here, he's been drinking from a fire hose with all these elections and everything else, and now he's just finally getting the chance now to develop a full strategic plan, which includes, I've just got some bullet points: increased outreach and education to communities, improved communications with jurisdictions, with the city entities, the city secretaries, etc. Increased presence on social media, more newsletters and increased frequency of those newsletters. I think right now we've got a newsletter for poll workers to VDRs and who else?
We're working VDRs right now. And then we're thinking about maybe an internal one, but it's.
Yeah. So, a lot more of that, just communicating with folks. More aggressive media strategy. We had the Dallas Morning News in here today. We're with a reporter for probably 2.5 hours, I think, educating her about the process here in Dallas County. Quick response to misinformation. I can tell you that misinformation from both right and left is a big problem nationally. And not only from internally, but externally. There was just a report today that said that Russia is going to step up their misinformation campaign to create confusion for the midterms. And so, so what we want to do is have a rapid response to all this misinformation on our website and through other means. Increased use of analytics. I already talked about how we use analytics, and then more instructional videos. So those are just some of the highlights from the communications department, and there's other things that they're working on with their their new team. Voter registration department, this is a big area of growth for us. We're going to do a pilot project to do a voter registration mailing to unregistered households. We're going to measure to see what the response is like, and we may take that countywide. It's a randomized sample, so it's not targeting any particular area, but we may do that on a regular basis to mail out to those where there's a household that we've identified no one's registered to vote there.
So you mail in the registration form to them?
Yeah.
And have them mailed back to you?
Exactly. An improved volunteer deputy register program. Right now, we train a lot of people, so we got lots of lists, and we train them, and then we say, we kind of hope they go to events. And so what we're going to try to do more aggressively is we've got a whole list of 2,000 VDRs, and then we've got our list of here's all the things going on in the county, and to try to marry them up, to push people together to say, hey, just like it's kind of the way I kind of say it right now is what we're doing now is if we had we trained all of our poll workers and hoped they showed up at a polling place. But we don't do that. We assign them to a polling place. So we're going to try to tie them together a little bit more to get our VDRs at these events. I can tell you, I live right over Clyde Warren Park, and I look down and I see, oh, there's a big crowd there today. I'm like, we got no one there, and that's not good. So we're going to try to get more people at those types of
Mike, what
events.
is the process working with DPS? I've had more than one time in each election, people come in and say, my husband and wife, we both, moved here, we got our license, driver's license, and yes, we want to register to vote, and this one's registered, but the husband's not.
Motor voter.
And they put it in the same time.
So
what's the lag time on that?
So DPS is required to do that, and that gets to the third bullet point. So every agency that deals with the public is required by federal motor voter law to hand out a voter registration, to offer an opportunity to register to vote.
So it's not just check a form, yes, I want to register. They have to fill it out.
I can't remember what their process is, but I mean, they allow you to register to vote at DPS.
They will send you the voter registration card. They're not registrars.
Well, you can register at DPS
That's what I
when you get your license.
Are you positive?
Yeah. Now, having said that, there's a lot of other agents, so they're probably the one agency that does it fairly consistently.
Because that's what I've heard, the same exact thing that she said, that
They check a box, yes,
nothing
I want to
happens.
register. But is that registering it, or do they physically have to get a card and then leave it with them?
Esmeralda, can you answer that question?
Yeah.
At DPS, when they ask you to check that, yes? Register you also sign like next
Right.
Can we get an import file? We
from
get
that?
an import from DPS.
Okay.
So that's the one agency that probably has it down, where it's a much more automated process. Other agencies, when they deal with people, they're supposed to be handing out those cards. And I can tell you that they don't. And so what we want to try to do is to try to work with those agencies to educate them, you're supposed to be doing this. And in fact, you're mandated to do this. And we can track your voter registration cards, and we can kind of tell if you're handing out these cards. And so it's kind of working with them and this is more of a longer term project. It's not immediate, but I did something similar to this in San Bernardino County, and it became the model for all of California. We worked with ACLU on that, where the ACLU was kind of helping us, and they were kind of the hammer, frankly. They were saying, you'll either administer this program or we're going to sue you. And so we got a lot of cooperation from agencies. And so we want to do something similar to that. We just want to make sure that people are doing what they're mandated to do. And
So if a husband and wife comes to the polling thing and one's, yep, you're in the book, and this one says, I'm sorry, you're not in the book or anything, but we registered at the same time at DPS, then you just give them a provisional ballot and write all that down.
Yeah, if someone's
They're
not,
not in the book. And
that's always the case. If someone's not found on the e-poll book, they're offered a provisional. And then if we find them later that they should have been registered, then that vote will count.
By state law, all of the Texas public high school principals are deputy voter registrars.
So
Do we do any outreach to them to A, remind them, and or B, educate them about what that process would be like, and could we do something?
Sure. Esmeralda, do you want to go ahead and answer that?
Yes, principals are automatically, well, two deputy registers. We do reach out to them when we are recruiting to see if anybody wants to register to vote, as far as high school students.
As well. You're saying that every principal, every high school principal in Texas is an automatic DDR. They don't have to go through any training. It's
You don't
not.
have to go through any.
No. When did that start?
By law.
Well, I know they're required to operate,
Yeah,
because
the
that was what.
Secretary of State sends them a packet where it's kind of
Right,
like.
I received the package. I gave, make sure you went to all the principals, went to the social studies department. But I've never seen that a principal was an automatic DDR.
Yes.
Because I know they have the responsibility to provide the voter registration to the students, and they schedule it and all that. They work with different organizations. But you're saying that they are a DDR.
They already are, and they can assign either the counselor or
Right.
something to
Right.
assist them to do that as well.
Right,
The representative.
right. And they have the responsibility to do that. But I know that they were considered a DDR.
Do they exercise that authority?
No,
Not
no,
necessarily.
They don't have time. They don't
Yeah.
do that. The
Yeah.
principals
Well,
don't.
and so that's part of where we're going with this kind of improved VDR program.
Mhm.
Esmeralda is one of two people on the comm team that's been here historically, and she's doing everything.
Yeah, she
She's
does.
doing everything, right?
We
And so what we're
work
trying to do is to get her more help, where we have more people on the comm team. We have a 6-person team, I think. And so Esmeralda's going to be more focused to try to, do more with the VDRs, including schools,
Right.
including everyone. So,
I have one question too,
Sure.
Michael. Are you currently working at all with the sheriff's department, or maybe the commission, I don't know who it would be, to assure that people who are incarcerated but still eligible to vote, and also people who work in the jail because their hours are so odd, that they maybe are able to get a voting center?
So
Fair.
we were approached by an organization that's promoting that.
Okay.
We've met with them. We've met with Harris County because Harris County's done this.
Right.
And so we just met with them I don't even know what date, last Thursday, I think it was. And we got what their program looked like, and now we're gonna go to the sheriff, our sheriff, Dallas County Sheriff, and we're gonna propose something similar here. And we're trying to make it as easy on the sheriff as possible, to try to say, here's what the parameters of what this
Because it
would look
benefits
like.
the employees.
Yes, there's a public side and there's a private, a jail side, and so it's one polling place that offers to the employees, et cetera, and then to the inmates. That's the way they did it in Harris County.
Oh, that's good to know.
Because the inmates can qualify for the ballot by mail program.
Yeah, if they're not a felon. I mean,
If they,
Right.
whether they have voting rights or not.
right. And so they qualify for the vote by mail, but then there's an election day component if they've missed that window.
That's yeah, exactly. They could be eligible to vote, but that window, right?
Yeah. So we're working towards that. We haven't met with the sheriff yet, so we'll see.
That's great. I know it's a process, but that's great to know.
On the mail ballot department, as they're going out, getting out continued education, is there any plan to work with senior rec centers? I know Dallas has a very vibrant senior rec program for seniors. I know DeSoto, Duncanville, Richardson, a lot of the cities have very vibrant senior programs, and that would be a great target audience to receive that mail ballot information, because they were really confused.
Yeah, I think, and we've got a feeler out to our attorneys right now, because remember SB1 put restrictions on what we could do or any government official could do on what, with the distribution of vote by mail,
Outbound
right?
programs, yeah.
And then there was a temporary restraining order, and frankly, I don't know where that's at right now. And so we got to find out where that case is and to find out what we can do going into this next election.
I know along those lines of voter education, I think that would be, a great target audience, because I'm sure the majority of your mail-in ballots are seniors and those that are disabled.
Absolutely.
And if you have those persons in gathering in those, they have databases, especially through the Parks and Rec with their senior programs.
Yeah.
They're distributed throughout the entire city.
Yeah.
And very actively involved.
We want to be as aggressive as we can legally be. And so I know that's a big growth area for us if we're allowed to do it. So the training department, we
Before we leave voter registration, I got an oddity I'd like somebody to figure out. I believe it was the May 24th election. Election clerk, asked the voter for, their identification for voting. Election clerk accepts a driver's license, scans the back, up pops Dallas County voter registration information. Everything's cool. Turns the driver's license back over to her, turn back to the voter. It's an Illinois driver's license. How can that happen? It's anecdotal, but how can that happen? Something that's Illinois on the front and matches up with Dallas County voter registration on the scans on the back of the card. I don't understand. I know there's a.
Did you see that or did you hear about it?
I saw it. I actually, I would like to see somebody run with that question. And I think it was a young woman. I think I know her street address on a Ravendale, and I didn't have the presence of mind to take down her driver's license information, but I think I could track it down. Now there is a driver's license compact where states talk to each other on driver's license, but how does that transcend into voter registration? We're not sharing voter registration information with states generally. So how can something that looks like an Illinois driver's license be good for voting in Texas? So
it's a great question. I don't know.
And somebody suggests, well, young people get phony driver's licenses. So I don't know if there's anything to that. So.
I didn't see that.
I can guarantee that's what it was, because I looked at the face of the driver's license. It was Illinois.
Okay. Do you have the name of the person?
I've got the address. I could track down the information so I could track down the person who was a young female, and probably in my precinct at Ravendale street address.
Well, we could look it up to the best of our ability.
Yeah, I've got enough demographics. I think we could track down to who it was. So.
Okay. Training department. I've talked about a lot of this. The utilization of our new training facility, and which you guys will see at some point. Refining the trainer program. Recording equipment training videos. I mean, we've got a lot of our training recorded already. We're going to re-record some of our voiceover overlays with Nick's, our new expert on the video stuff, and then so we're trying to record more of the equipment piece. Right now, we're doing. One of the reasons that we record stuff is to be consistent. So every trainer, every class gets the exact same training. And then the trainer is basically just a facilitator answering questions. And so we've done that for most of our training, but for the equipment training, the individual pieces, that's still live. So we want to make that not live, and we're recording. And in our new place over there, we've got these big giant screens, so that everyone will be able to see and hear adequately. Reorganization of the training of the way we train the judges notebook, just the approach to that. Utilize poll worker newsletter for general elections education. I kind of talked about that already. And then following the recommendations of the SEAC training subcommittee where we can. Mail ballot department, continued education regarding SB1 requirements. Revision of the cure process. I kind of talked about that already, the letters that we send out, customizing those letters. For our voting sites department, the hiring of staff. We've got, I can tell you this, going into that last election, we only had 2 full-time staff members out of a 7-person team. And those were at our lowest levels. And so that the majority of that voting site staff was all temp workers. And so we're revising everything about voting sites. The revision of the judge appointment, placement of alternate judges, and emergency assignment process. That entire process, we're flow charting it out, we're reviewing it with the parties, getting their buy-in, and then get the buy-in of Commissioners Court about how we appoint. And basically what it boils down to is the model here in Texas gives you 2 options. And the one option we've been using is you're appointed to a location. And the assumption is you're always going to show up. And that's a bad assumption because we probably, out of our 450, we probably have 150 to 175 no-shows, and we got stats on all that. And so we're divorcing that there's the appointment process and then the assignment process or placement process. And so we want to appoint not 469 judges, we want to appoint 500, 600, 700 judges, and then we have a lot more in our pocket so that when people don't show up for an assignment, or refuse their appointment, that we can place people second placements better. And the reason the parties have a lot of interest in this is that it gives them the ability to retain their original appointment. In other words, when in a vote center, in a countywide polling place model like we're in, a vote center model, the distribution between Democrats and Republican presiding judges is based off of the last gubernatorial election. So in our county, 58% of the judges are Democrats, 42% are Republicans. And using the model that we have now, if a Democrat doesn't show up, Republican alternative becomes and vice versa. And the parties don't like that because they're like, well, that's ours. And so if we divorce the appointment and the placement process, the party gets a second chance at the placement, and it doesn't automatically go to the opposite party. And so I think, how many crossovers did we have for the May 7th election?
I want to say 100 and in the low 100s, I believe it was.
So the Democrats lost and the Republicans, they all lost a significant number to the opposite party. And so with this new process, that will go away. Plus everything happens much earlier in the process. So we're placing and we're replacing, and we're doing everything much sooner than we have in the past. So I feel really good about the approach.
As a judge, and speaking for some other people who are judges who want to be judge and try to be a judge, is there a way that your team can put that process together like you did for the other things? Because it's very confusing. Who do we call to become? Who do they call? Is it the party? Is it the elections department for which election? It's very confusing.
I totally agree, and that's exactly why we're revising the process, because there's too many chefs. Too many chefs spoil the broth, and so they're talking to the parties, they're talking to us, they're talking to outside people, and so what we're laying down is, at this certain point, commissioners own it. At this certain point, the parties own it, and at this certain point, we own it. And so there's handoffs, and so there's not this confusion about who's on first. And so it's really clarifying the roles and making it much simpler for the judges, so they know who to deal with. Along with that, we don't like our current software to manage this process. We would love to just start from scratch and build our own. With the time limitations that we have, we won't be able to do that. So we're kind of in phase 1 of modifying our current software and kind of Band-Aid approach to try to make it work with our new process. Long-term, we will rebuild it completely. We're going to expand our poll worker recruitment. So it'll be expanded in ongoing recruiting poll workers. What we want to do is have a big pool, because beggars can't be choosers. And so if we have, a limited number of poll workers, we've got to put up with some poor performers. And having said that, I can tell you that the vast majority of our poll workers are fantastic, and they're dedicated, and so, but we want to make sure that we're always placing the best quality people to service our voters. And so we're trying to make sure that we give the parties the ammo to we're going to have an objective criteria for how we're grading those workers, so that the parties can place the best workers at every location. And then we're beginning the preparations of information for the Vote Center Advisory Committee, doing those surveys, basically, kind of what I talked about before. Logistics department, completion of the move and the organization of our new warehouse. I mean, we kind of moved everything in there. Now we got to kind of get more settled in. We got to close down our Langdon Road warehouse. We still got some stuff in there we've got to get rid of. And then continued refinement of our supply packing checklists and processes. We made huge progress in making that the supplies. I can tell you the number of calls we've had for I don't have this or I don't have that. With the proper use of packing and checklists, et cetera, our numbers are way, way down. And so, but we're going to continue to refine that. Central Count Department, we've already done a huge amount of rebuilding in there. We have to do some tweaks, finalization of the transfer of responsibilities from ES&S, our vendor, to us. And so we're doing most of the work now instead of offloading it to ES&S. We just got to continue that transition. And then some revision of some of our chain of custody documentation. What we found is through this audit, we're seeing still some holes in our chain of custody. Our election hardware department, hiring of our election hardware manager, complete inventory of our election equipment. We finally got all of our election equipment in one location. And so we got to get a good inventory and scheduling our equipment to be properly rotated. We were using the same kind of equipment over and over while other equipment was sat on shelves, some of it unboxed from 2019. And so we're developing that rotation schedule and maintenance schedule with our vendor. And then continued refinement of the election preparation checklist. I can tell you that we introduced new preparation checklists for the May elections, and our numbers of preparation problems went down. So we're going to continue that refinement.
Some simple decisions make it more difficult for election judges, like, we have to do a Where's Waldo for the payroll gold sheets when we have a yellow folder that they could originate and return to that. So that's just a consideration.
It's kind of funny because you guys have served as judges. There's envelopes 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Yes.
Unbelievably antiquated. You know what happens to 1, 2, and 4?
Nothing.
They all come to the same location.
Right.
Yeah.
When nothing happens with them.
Nothing.
And so I proposed to the Secretary of State, I said, I want to have
matters.
one envelope that says 1, 2, and 4 on it.
Information people don't need to know.
Yeah.
Highly
Yeah.
frustrating.
Yeah, and so, the only one that counts is 3, because that's what, the
Right.
judge takes with them. And so, I've heard that there's other counties that do that, so I think that's what we're going to do.
Doctor, it hurts when I do that. Don't do that. So.
So little things like that. It's just
Yeah.
simplify.
Yeah.
So GIS department, continued proofing of our voter address file, and then this redistricting that we've talked about with the cities now. And then continued growth of GIS technology for everything we do. I don't know if you guys, if you hadn't seen it yet, you will. We've got a new voter-friendly or mobile-friendly lookup for how to get to your polling place. With gives driving directions, et cetera. We've got on the polling place lookup, you can actually look at the turnout on election day. It kind of gets to that, which locations are busy. And so that's kind of cool. It makes bigger circles for those that are super busy and little tiny circles that are ones that are not. And we use all sorts of GIS technology internally. So our GIS guys are great, and we want to continue to grow.
And the phones are getting smarter too. Like, I know for 911, they can use a satellite positioning now for 911 rather than just sending them to cell towers. So
Yeah, absolutely. And then, so that gets to the gubernatorial election. I already kind of talked about that. We're going to use our standard early voting sites, and we're probably going to use some mega sites. We haven't quite, we're just beginning those negotiations. I guess in 2020, there was certain mega sites, American Airlines Center and stuff. And so I think that worked out pretty well. So we're shopping for those sites now. We think that would be a good idea for this election. And then, of course, the 469 election day vote centers, no reductions there at this point.
We actually did voter registration at the Mavericks game.
Yeah.
That was cool.
Yeah. So lastly, there's this join our team. These are some of the positions that are still available. If you know anybody, we're looking for a Vietnamese language coordinator. We're looking for a purchasing clerk. We're looking for a public communications coordinator. And that public communications coordinator is someone who works, that basically helps manage our phone desks, phone banks, and our front desk. Purchasing clerk's obvious and Vietnamese obvious. Facilities lead and a facilities coordinator. So I talked about those surveys and stuff. Those are two vacant positions where we have nobody managing our facilities. And so those are two really important positions. And we're just lucky enough that one of our employees that used to do that, who retired, has come back to help us. So, but she's probably not going to stick around forever, so we need to fill those positions. And so those are our current positions, 5 positions that we have. And we'll probably have some more in the future after we get some reclasses done. So that's all I have for today. Any questions?
Any other questions online? Somebody monitoring the folks online?
Nobody raise your hand? I don't see hands
I
up.
don't know if you all can see them, I can't see.
Do you have anything, Chance?
We're gonna meet in August sometime, next time.
I think so. We're going to try to set that up for late August. So again, encourage 2 chairs to, they need to meet and formulate their reports. That's when we'll be kind of giving our okay on those reports. Okay, there's no
public comments.
Yeah, if there's no other questions from the group, we're going to move to public comments. Are there any public comments? Yes, sir.
I did not sign up. Is that okay? Are you taking open
That
comments?
should be fine, yes, sir.
Awesome. So my one comment in terms of the training, I think there's been during the last November 2020, which I consider the last super partisan election, I guess, there was a lot of tension about between the poll watchers and the judges over information that the watchers were prevented from seeing. So I would just request that a part of the training for the judges is make sure they know that the election code allows for the watchers to be able to observe all of the election conduct, which includes the e-poll books, because somehow there became this confusion that made the judges and the clerks think that the watchers weren't allowed to see what the actual clerk could see by looking at the e-poll book.
Good comment, thank you.
Online.
I don't think the person themselves.
We need to replay the conversation.
hello.
I think the recording secretary was just trying to get the name down. Yeah.
Okay, any other public comments, either online or here present? No questions online or public comments? Okay, at this time we move to adjourn this meeting. So seconded. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A lot of information, Mike.
Now I'm out of speaking voice.
Digest it now, so.
They actually had, our board, our vote, Sean Reed